All right, so this week we are talking about composition of photos and cardinal rules. Now, remember from the Intro to Forensic Science class, the photos that we need to be taking to accurately depict our crime scene is going to be some photos that establish the location, so our address, the street signs. We're going to have to do our overalls, our mid-ranges, our close-ups, and our close-ups with scale. We're not covering this progression today. Today we're going to be talking about how we compose pictures, as in how the photos look. Now, some of the composition is going to be covering overalls, mid-ranges, and close-ups, but we're going to talk about the overall mid-range close-up concept a little bit later next week. Now, one thing to remember about composition, if you Google photo composition or you take any other photography classes related to artistic photography, what you quickly find out is that CSI is not art, and a lot of your composition involves artistic thoughts. And a big part of composition is something called the rule of thirds. In artistic photos, what you want is to have things of interest fall upon lines that are right around the 1/3 mark in a picture. So if we divided this image up into sections 1, 2, 3, and top to down 1, 2, 3, you'll notice that this tree and the sun starlight thing is right along that 1/3 mark, and the hill here is right along the 1/3 mark, so that it makes this picture visually interesting because the human eye is not necessarily drawn always to the center of an image. We are kind of drawn to edges, and so if you have something that is really interesting, not right at the edge, but not right in the center, right around that 1/3 mark, what you do is you end up having the human eye drawn into, ooh, cool. But that's not what we're looking for in CSI. We're not looking for that artistic draw in. What we're looking for is to show something true and accurate. So, our first rule, fill the frame. If I want to show you a picture of an object, like say a gun, I want the gun to fill the whole frame. So this is my close-up picture. You know, the first one here over on the left, you can't see anything. I mean, it looks like a gun, but here over on the right, we can actually even read a little bit of this, so you can see this firearm. Thinking about, say, like a mid-range. So here we've got a gun, and it's in a hall, and we can see like the gun's way off to the side. We want the gun kind of centered. We want to kind of fill the frame with the image. So now, oh look, we've got like a drinking fountain here. We've got some of the thing. We've got the door frame. Now remember that process, overall mid-range close-up. What we're looking at is trying to tell the visual story of the crime scene. So, think about the background of your photo when you're trying to kind of fill the frame here. We want to show what's important in the background. We also want to show what's important in the foreground. So if you need to, you might need to come over here. You might need to come over there. You need to make sure that we're really getting that frame filled in good. Now, something to be mindful of here as we start talking about filling our frames, also are our cardinal rules, really in the composition, shadows and lens flare. Be mindful of shadows because you're going to be thought, what are you trying to hide by covering it in a shadow? And your lens flare is going to be, well, what details are we losing because we've got these streaks coming across the image? Shadows and lens flare can be cool for artistic photos. We aren't doing art. We are doing crime scene. Your second rule. Remember we talked last week about the aperture, which is the part of your eye here, the pupil that opens and closes to let light in. So we need to control that depth of field because not only does the aperture allow more or less light into the lens, it also can affect to what degree we have our depth, to what degree we can have focus. So here we have this row of Lego stormtroopers, and the guy in the middle is in focus, but everybody to the left and to the right of him is out of focus. Now, for a lot of our stuff in crime scene investigation work, we're taking a lot of close-ups. We got like fingerprints and blood spatter. So it's quite possible that we don't have to worry about the depth of focus, but think about like a car crash scene where you're looking at that depth. We want to be able to see the gouges in the road, car 1, car 2, the stop sign in the background. We would like all of that in focus and not just the one car in focus and everything else blurry. So we kind of hit on this with last week, the aperture is like your pupil. Typically our apertures go from a range of 2 to 32, so here's kind of showing what some apertures look like from 16 to 2, so wide open to really tightly constricted, very similar to like the eye, wide open to tightly constricted. So when you have a small f-stop, so when you have that aperture wide open and you're allowing as much light in as that lens can accept, you have a small depth of field. You can see the monkey, you can't see the fence. When it's pinpointed, when you got that, all small, we're not letting as much light in, but now we can actually focus the whole way down. We have a better sense of focus. So you see the monkey and you see the fence. So you need to be mindful of this. Think about, a bunch of evidence markers at a crime scene. Here, we can read a couple of them and they vanish quickly. Here, we can read them going all the way back. And like I said, at our car crashes, this is where we need to be understanding some of these skills, because I need to be able to see the skid mark, these gouges in the road, car 1, car 2, the signage in the background, the curve, the tree, all these things could have played a component in this crash. And if something is blurry, something has been lost in my depth of field, what am I hiding? Cardinal rule number 3. Not sure why that says 2. We're too far into this recording, so we'll just leave it be. But this is cardinal rule number 3. Keep it parallel. All right, so when we take a picture and we talk about, like, say, especially like in our close-ups, if I want you to read this ruler, I have the ruler essentially in, a parallel plane to you, the viewer. You can't read it when I'm holding it like this. You need it like this. You need it so you can read the numbers. If we start going off into these angles, you can't read it. So likewise, I'm looking at the gun here on the floor. Notice I'm looking at it in this picture 90 degrees. The gun is here and my camera is here and it's taking the picture straight down at it. Versus here, the gun is here and my camera's at this angle taking a picture at it. We're losing details. We're not showing a good image of what we want. Looking across an object versus kind of thinking about a reference point. Look at here. We've kind of created some artificial elongations and contractions based on standing at a weird angle, and you've got this pole in the background and there's a little bit of hillside, versus if we stand off to the side and make kind of a triangle where the object we're looking at and then me taking the picture and then the pole over here, you get this triangle, and now, okay, now proportions make sense and things stay balanced. Something that can happen, we start, going across. I'm taking a picture of a building. I want to stand in front of it and look straight at it, versus stretching it out by looking down the length of it. And suddenly now it starts to shrink, it starts to grow. We start to change with our proportions. It can make things be not a true and accurate representation. And that's really our goal here in photography, is a true and accurate representation. So our cardinal rules are filling the frame, maximizing our depth of field and controlling it so that we can see everything, not limit us, and we want to be parallel. We don't want to be looking off at an angle. Here, this is showing cardinal rule number 1, right? We've maximized, filled the frame, but unfortunately here we are filling the frame, but we're off at a weird angle, and so we are losing some of our details. All right, so that's a little bit quick about our composition. Remember, you can Google and look up things about composition and photographs, but it's going to talk mostly about artistic things. In CSI, our composition is a little different. What we want is to really have a true and accurate representation of what we were looking at. We don't want representations to be artistic. We don't want our interpretations of what we're looking at, because we want it to be true. And so if there's anything left to interpretation or anything left to guesstimation, suddenly now we have issues with, is our image a true and factual representation? Because true and factual should not be open up to any kind of interpretation. All right, if anybody has any questions, as always, I'm here to help. So shoot me an email, post up on Blackboard, stop out of the PSTC and see me. Otherwise, I will talk to you next week.